Hi, this is Anthony Parent of IRSMedic. And in our last podcast, we talked about the problems of how words get misused, and the word citizenship-based taxation gets confused with RBT. And here's the real problem: is that people are not united under one cause. And John has created a great. John was a guest on a podcast, and he created sort of the four different subgroups of people, all sort of not on the same page. And I think we have an idea that everybody get under one umbrella. So people are so divided. We all look for our own self-interest, and we're not thinking of the entire picture. And that is exactly how the IRS gets away with the nonsense that it does. And this is a great point. If you're watching this podcast, and if you've been a subscriber, can I just tell you something? You know far more about the income tax than anyone in Congress. I don't think there's anyone in Congress who would know more about this than you. And the fact is they all they all take advantage of our splitting and splintering up. So the purpose of this podcast is to get everybody on the same page here. And so I'm going to do a little screen share and show John's article. And Keith Redmond's joining us. Keith, what is going on here? What's your opinion of what's going on in all our divisions and how we can get everyone together?
Yeah, I think it is a bit frustrating because I'll do the best I can to explain it. There is confusion in regards to what is the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal needs to be severing U.S. citizenship from tax residency. That's the ultimate goal. However, and I'll just speak generally, we have different organizations that have, I would say, different types of goals, but they're couching it in to the definition, or they're couching it into the term residency-based taxation. And then we also have a particular organization who has a very large membership of American retirees who have moved outside the United States. And I always use France, for example, but it could be any other country that has a generous tax treaty with the U.S. where it makes it, how would you say, attractive for American retirees to retire to that particular country. And, we have accidental Americans who are, focused, and understandably so, focused on dealing with their problems with bank accounts, which is important, but it doesn't solve the overall problem. It doesn't get rid of the tumor, if you will. And that's where we are today. And it's fragmented, and we need to bring people into one united principle to fight for. Voila.
Absolutely, Keith. And so John wrote this. John created these points, and you guys were talking about these four different types. Now, I want to start with the group that is at the top, those who want to end citizenship taxation. And then we're talking about SEAT, SEAT.org, is focused on ending U.S. citizenship taxation. That means citizenship is never relevant for the purposes of taxation. We think that is the flag everybody should be carrying. However, there's a few other groups. They don't want to go as far as people sort of want to do their own little thing. And that's kind of, again, how we are so splintered. Because the next group is those who ignore citizenship taxation. And you can kind of do it to a degree. If you're not in the U.S. tax system, you're overseas, you don't really need to do too much. John, what would you say about the people who are ignoring citizenship taxation?
Well, just that they ignore it. They don't file. And then that's a personal decision. It's also, I think, a personal solution to the problem. There are untold websites who do nothing but advocate noncompliance with U.S. tax laws. And, that may work for them, but it definitely hurts getting a solution to the overall problem, right? I mean, their view is, I don't really care about the problem. I'm not going to invest any of my behavior or time into solving the problem. I don't care about anybody else. I don't care about my children, et cetera. All I'm going to do is ignore this and move on with my life. And you'll find this stuff all over the place. And again, I understand it. I think it's easily understandable why people behave that way, particularly now when they see the horror stories of being in the U.S. tax system.
Yeah.
But I would say that it is extremely unhelpful in, trying to solve the overall problem, which is to end this U.S. extraterritorial citizenship tax regime.
I think a lot of people are ignoring the tax. If you're ignoring it, do you really want to advocate for the repeal of it? You're kind of raising, you're
No, they certainly don't. They certainly
right. So you got to.
Right.
So I mean, that's the
Right.
problem. And there you go. Because
Right.
you're ignoring it, you have to go into hiding.
Yeah, and
Right.
I think
You
that
can't
generally
express yourself
speaking,
anymore.
yeah, I think generally speaking, they're harming the movement to get change. Generally speaking.
Well, and I
You
think
be
there's that
you be
adage. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. It's a pressure relief valve. But for the IRS, not for us. But the non-compliance allows, okay, I'll just not do it. But one way to get rid of terrible laws is to force them into the letter, which the IRS actually can't force a law to the letter.
Well, we're quoting presidents today. I think that was an Abraham Lincoln quote.
I think so. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna have a surprise for
Anthony, are you getting ready to announce that you're running?
Oh, yeah, I might be. Yeah, all right, I'm gonna have to announce it now because even in the firm, I mentioned it, and I got a lot of blowback from my team members. They were like, "You're not going to seriously do that." Then a few were like, "Yeah, you should do that." So I'm definitely going to do it.
Well, you've been talking about presidents all day today, which is unusual for you. And may I assume that Keith will be your vice presidential running mate?
Keith, I hope so. Keith, I hope so. We'll have a lot of fun. We are.
Yeah.
Keith is a pianist, and so you're the drummer. So we are going to get.
Yeah.
We're going to be that power trio. Talking about the truth about Abraham Lincoln, and also the big one, George Washington.
Yeah. I'd like to interject before we move on to the presidents, if I may.
Yeah.
John, so what you're saying, I have 2 points. One, what you're saying is that those American immigrants with an E, Americans overseas who are just not in the U.S. tax system and they're just on, they're just laying low. They're harming the fight, if you will, because they're not being part of fighting for it because they just don't want anything to do with it. Is that what you're saying?
I wouldn't go so far as to say, and if I said harming, I think I'll backpedal from that. It's not that they're harming the movement to get rid of CBT. It's that their support would be very, very valuable in getting rid of CBT, and they are declining to involve themselves in this, which minimizes the extent of the problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other point I wanted to make is that there is another segment of the American overseas population that probably has no interest in the fight. And these are the short-term American expats who are only overseas for maybe 2 or 3 years and will be moving back to the United States. And I bring this up is that because certain organizations will group those people into the overall American immigrant population, whether it skews
it dilutes the issue, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It skews the issue as well.
Yeah.
And so that particular population is really not a population for us to even focus on because they're just basically a homeland American overseas temporarily.
I agree.
Do you see what I mean?
You. Yes, I do. And I agree with you that population is not relevant. And I also agree that the inclusion of that population, as we recognize these as tax filers, I think creates probably a higher perception of compliance than may actually.
Exactly. Right. And
that is
also,
correct.
And the other thing too is oftentimes there are companies doing their compliance work for them.
Oh yeah, I mean, people.
So hey, you're coming, we'll just take care of it, and
I mean, they don't even understand what the issues are.
Yeah.
Correct.
So the reason for that, if I can just add something to that, okay, which I think is important to recognize, is that if we're looking at short-term Americans abroad, their whole financial center of gravity is in the U.S. tax system. Okay, they're not trying to. Map out their retirement planning.
No, right. They don't have those issues, right?
Financial planning. So I think they're irrelevant, basically, for our discussion. And I almost think that, I'm going to go this far. I think the inclusion of them in the discussion destabilizes the discussion, and it makes it
I
seem
agree.
the problem is not as bad as it really is.
Well, and this is, I mean, because if you ask someone who spent, 2 years in Switzerland working for Microsoft or something like that, like, well, what did you think of, what did you think of the U.S. tax code, and how wasn't it hard to do? No, it was fine. I don't know why people have such a problem with it.
Right.
So that's because they're not hit with the multitude of things of the long term planning of having financial products, having the gall to have financial
Right.
products outside of the U.S. I want to talk about the third group, those looking to escape citizenship taxation. Members of this group are concerned with solving their specific problem. For example, they want the taxation of capital gains on principal residence, PFIX, CFC, or foreign trust rules changed. Once that issue is solved, they believe their problems are solved. And who I put in here too? Escaping U.S. citizen, those who are looking to do, those who are looking to get the dual passport and go down that road. But it really doesn't work because you still have your citizenship taxation. So you think you're escaping, and then you find out you're really not. John, could you think of some situations where people?
Well, these are just people who experience the tax system in terms of a very specific irritant for them. And as long as that irritant is solved, they're good to go. They don't care about the broader principle, right?
Well,
So,
and I will say Homeland Americans with things overseas would probably fall into this because, like, well, look, I just have a PFIC, and I just have, I have some mutual funds, in Europe. I just need that fixed, and then I'm fine because everything else I have is in the U.S. And so I think they get lumped in too,
yeah, I think that that's
and
right.
that dilutes it too.
And then the whole bank account problem, right, is although I'm very sympathetic, obviously, to this issue as an issue, it gets so much, the problem is that it is not really the issue. Okay. It's the problem for those specific people. The issue is, the citizenship taxation generally. And, for the group of people whose only real interest is getting the bank account access issue solved, I mean, that's what they're doing. They're saying, I just want to escape this problem. I just want to put it behind me and have it not really apply to me. But I don't really care particularly,
Mm.
whether it applies to everybody else. So it's what they're doing is, is they're getting off a sinking ship and leaving everybody else there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. Right. Let's talk about the last group, those who are looking to, oh God, I don't know if I can say this word together. Oh
Yeah.
God, this is going to hurt. Okay, I'll try it. Improving citizenship taxation.
I
Well,
know.
Ow.
this is
Ow.
largely, where the movement has been. I mean, whether it's the holding bill, the buyer bill, or things proposed by various. I mean, these are things that are proposed by advocacy groups. To be clear, okay. Whether it's ACA or AIR or I mean,
Yeah.
their issue is, it's terrible, yes, but I mean, how can we tweak it around the edges? And this type of discussion usually revolves around, well, why don't we improve, expand the foreign earned income exclusion, for example, right? Or why don't we let people exclude up to a higher amount of income, or something like that. But I think it is vitally important to recognize that those people remain U.S. tax residents. Okay, it's like, yeah, you're still going to remain a U.S. tax resident. We're just going to make it a little more comfortable for you, or a
Right.
little less uncomfortable. And and this might work for you at one stage of life, but not another. Okay, it divides and conquers, right? And I think this is a very important theme that these four different categories of individuals, which I think is roughly correct. Okay, roughly correct are not united around the principle. If we don't hang together, we're going to hang separately. They're not united around that at all.
Right.
Some way or another, they are focused on either improving their personal situation in a way that ignores the overall problem, or in a way that, improving citizenship taxation makes the overall situation perhaps a little better, for generally a larger number of people. And the whole problem with this movement, if there is one, is the ability to unite people around one goal. And I think that this might be a good moment. Keith was talking before this podcast about the issue of retirees abroad and this sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's a point that I wanted to bring up, which plays into point number 3 and point number 4. And I'll just use an example because I've been getting a lot of this lately. And it seems to be that France is the particular example, is that American retirees who move to, and I'll just use France, who move to France, benefit from the U.S.-France tax treaty, where CBT works for them, where RBT would be detrimental to them. So they're not really a proponent of supporting RBT. And so what I don't understand with that, and this is where I need your collectively, John Anthony, your expertise. I would think that if RBT was implemented, these tax treaties would be recalibrated where the American retiree would not be harmed financially. Am I correct or am I off base? It's something that needs to be addressed because there is concern with that population.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, and this is sort of just what I would think of immediately. It's like, well, what if in France, you're thinking it's like, okay, well, we're going to give a special here's someone living in France. Okay, they're doing everything in France. We got to give them a special tax rate. It's like, well, no offense, but if you're living in France, you pay the French taxes, and why are you want to be there? You want to be there. Then you pay the French taxes, and I don't think I don't think you should be entitled to the both. Well, I want to live in France, but pay a lower tax rate. It's like, well, which one is it? Like,
well,
I
that's the question,
but I don't.
Right.
But I want my special. So I think that's the thing. So that sounds like that group would be.
So how do we get
the? You're not. They're the adversary.
Yeah. So how do we get that group to support the overall United principle? Is there, and that's what I don't know because I'm not into the nuts and bolts of the tax code and so forth. So is there a way
I think there is. And I think it's really just a lack of understanding here. I mean, so I have heard this sort of, oh my God, we don't want to we don't want to move to RBT because it hurts retirees abroad, all the time. Yeah. I think it's completely wrong. And let me explain. First of all, let me explain why retirees abroad are concerned. Okay. The reason they're concerned is that, their income sources are from the U.S. and they're taxed under the current regime, which means they're probably paying less U.S. tax on income like Social Security or perhaps pension income, U.S. pension income. And then they would if they were taxed as non-resident aliens. As non-resident aliens, they're taxed generally, at a different rate, a default rate of 30% generally. Usually that's reduced by treaty, et cetera. But their issue is that, all of a sudden they would definitely be taxed as non-resident aliens, and therefore this would hurt them. And of course, all that matters is them, right? Which really I find, I'm going to be clear, I find that personally very offensive. Okay. The whole notion that the U.S. tax system should be set up so people can retire abroad, is really offensive. I'll say it again. But the thing is, it doesn't matter because every proposal that I have seen to transition from citizenship taxation to residence-based taxation requires that those doing the transitioning take specific steps to do so, right? To toggle the switch to the new system. And all those people do is just not toggle the switch. They just, and this is what goes on in most other countries, like Canada, for example. They move abroad, they remain U.S. tax residents. They just keep on filing the returns as resident Americans, right? I mean, there's nothing about anything that's been proposed that would preclude that, and everything that has been proposed specifically does propose that. All right, that would have to be an opt-in provision, for those who are already in the current citizenship taxation system. So that's part one. Part two, let me address the comments about the treaty. I mean, the U.S.-France tax treaty is really extraordinary, and there's an interesting history to it that I'm not going to bore you with, but it is interesting. But the thing about it is that, no, I don't think it needs to be recalibrated because, again, I should have read this before our podcast today, but my memory of this is that the trigger for the benefit, which is that basically France is not going to impose taxation on U.S. source income as U.S. citizenship. Okay, I think it's U.S. citizenship. U.S. citizens living in France, U.S. citizens living in France. Now that's a different issue from what kind of tax system the U.S. has. You're still a U.S. citizen living in France, right? So I think you would still
Right.
get the benefit of that particular thing. So no, I do not agree with all these people who are putting up all these issues here. I think these are excuses, and I think that no, I really believe the only way to get change here is for all people subject to this, whether personally affected or not, or if personally affected, in what way they're affected. Every individual is subject to this to unite in favor of the principle that the United States has got to stop taxing people based on the circumstances of their birth and join the club, of every other country that taxes them based on the circumstances of life. In other words, sever citizenship from any definition of tax residency. But I've got to say to you that that is the one thing that these groups and people will not do. No, we will not ask for that. Well,
I don't understand why. I don't understand.
Well, and I just want to. I think maybe I can do. Well, I think I misspoke, because I said the retirees are adversaries, and it's like, well, and ignorant they are, but when they know the truth, no, they should be under our umbrella. So when they're and I think there might be intentional, miscommunications to as you say here, your quote here to end this, John, is pretty good. Americans abroad have divided and conquered each other, and I would say Americans in the U.S. are part of that as well.
oh yeah, absolutely.
So all Americans, we have divided and conquered each other with our tax code that no one wants. There's not, and this is always one of my sayings here is that you can't find anyone in the world, not one person in the world, who agrees that the U.S. tax code is perfect the way it is. You cannot. Everyone has an idea for an improvement. Everyone does. Therefore, no one actually wants what we have, but yet here it is. And it's that dividing and conquered and not thinking strategically, getting, and being ignorant. Now, this is one thing I would say for audience and people what do I do? What I do? One of the things to do is continue to listen and continue to research. Your fear, doubt, and anxiety is going to be caused by one thing, a lot of ignorance. And you know what? You can handle bad news. We all can handle bad news. We all can handle uncertainty when we know what's going on with something we can address. It's when it spirals out of control because we believe one thing and it's like, okay, that's going to mean this, this, and this, and we go off the ledge. So
Yeah.
one of the greatest things you can do is truly educate yourself on this, and being on this channel is one of the best things you can do as we go through it to explain exactly what it is. And one of the joys you have too, one of the joys you have of being subscribing to this channel is what's going to happen. And when you see it happen, you're like, oh, I know what that is. And you're not confused. You know why. You know why the bad news is happening. You're not acting like, oh, my God, why did that happen? No, there's a reason. There's a reason why it's happening. And the division, unfortunately, is one big thing that we all can't sit together. It's like, well, who actually voted for this? I want to know. I want to know who actually voted for this. And as I go through the history, it's no one. No one voted for this, because if we did, there would be that one person who would be happy. And again, and if you are that one person who is happy with the U.S. income tax below, please leave that in the comment below. We want to hear from you. But no one thinks the tax code is perfect. So how could that be? How could we have a law not one person in the world would say, yep, I stand by this 100%. Well, one reason is because you could never understand it, but there's too much to know. And then the law isn't the law. The regulations might be the law, or a webpage may be a law. Who knows what it is? So, gentlemen, concluding remarks. Keith, what are your concluding remarks to this?
Oh boy, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Is that we need to get behind one united principle. That's what needs to be done. Otherwise, we keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And the paradigm needs to be changed, that everybody gets behind severing U.S. citizenship from tax residency. Full stop.
Right
That's
on.
it.
Right
That's
on.
it.
John, your concluding remarks.
Keith, I think that's a great idea. I guess my concluding remark would be, I think that, there's this great old song. Maybe you want to add this to the video. It's a really old song. Is there a band called Brotherhood of Man or something? Anyway, it's a
That
song
sounds about
called
right.
United We Stand.
Oh
United
yeah,
We
yeah, yeah,
Stand.
yeah.
Oh,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah,
And
Yeah, I
I think
remember that song.
that might be a decent theme song. But for those who are, more interested in history and presidents, like you, Anthony, remember, okay, if we don't hang together, we will hang separately. And I think that was Benjamin Franklin.
Excellent. All right. Well, are we? Do we have to? Are we going to hit another?
Absolutely.
What's our next one going to be on?
Well, the statistics came out for who renounced U.S. citizenship, and American
Oh yeah.
Expat Financial wrote a good article on it. And I thought maybe we could do a bit of clarification on what that name and shame list really means, and who's supposed to be on it and who's not.
Yeah, right on. All right. Yeah, Helen wrote a great article. Yeah, let's next one for that. So this is Anthony Parent for IRSMedic. Keep an eye out for our next video. We're going to be talking about the name and shame list and some really kind of crazy things the government does. Thanks again for watching.